Hello and welcome to the Red Robin podcast, powered by Budget Ties Auto Centre and 𝗕𝓸𝓫𝗲 Chartered Accountants, the independent Hull Kingston Rovers podcast. Scott, it's great to have you for this special edition of the Red Robin podcast. Now, for those who don't know, Scott Solway is massive Hull Kingston Rovers supporter, home and away. He's there backing the Robins, but he's also one of the men behind a brand new show called Sully, which is, of course, about Clive Sullivan. Scott's the director of the show, and he's going to talk to us about Hull Kingston Rovers and specifically about this new show that's going to be at Hull Theatre later on in the year. Good afternoon, Scott. How are you doing, mate?
Afternoon, Jono. Thanks for having us on, mate. Thank you very much. Good to be here. Good to speak to you.
Not a problem. Right, I'm going to start off with a really shit question now, Scott. Sully, what is it about?
Yeah. Clive Sullivan. It's not a new play. It was first performed back in 2006, 2007. It's written by local playwright 𝗕𝗬𝗅𝗏𝗍, and he was commissioned by the Hull Theatre back in, I think it was early 2000s, I believe, before when it first came about, to write a play. And he came up with the idea of Sully, of Clive Sullivan. Obviously, with Clive representing both clubs, both that lot and us, of course. He thought it was a good idea to tell and write a story of Clive's life, really. So it's like a biography of his life. It was first performed at Hull Theatre in 2006 at the old Spring Street Theatre, as it was then. It was on again the following year, actually, 2007, because the first year was such a success that they wanted to put it on again. It hasn't been performed since 2007. So this is the first time it's been on for 16, 17 years. I've got my own little theatre company called Mosaic Productions. We're just a local community theatre company. And I approached, and 𝗕𝗬𝗍𝗍, the author, is a good friend of mine, and I approached him and I said, you know, how do you feel about the play being performed again? And he was really up for it. And the reason I'm doing it is because there's a few milestones that Clive has probably achieved, even though he sadly passed away back in 1985. There's milestones that he's achieved last year and this year. One being that he'd be 80 years old this year. He was 80 on the 9th of April, just gone. Of course, in the Rugby League World Cup last year, they used the Sully ball in all 61 matches of the World Cup in tribute to him. And he's recently been inducted into the Rugby League Hall of Fame as well. Many might say long after it should have been, you know. But so there was a few of those milestones there where I thought, you know, it might be a good time just to tell Clive's story again, thinking that there might be a generation or two people who maybe don't know who he is, which sounds crazy. But I believe that to be the case, certainly in the younger generation anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And he's someone who is quite unique in that he's loved by both sets of supporters in the city. You know, there's not many people who can have that tag, and it is something that sort of transcends across both sides. And it's a fantastic story. I don't know if you caught the Clive Sullivan documentary that was on the BBC.
I did, yeah.
And that is a sort of probably a fantastic precursor to the show because it highlights some of the struggles that Clive had in his early life and the challenge he faced when he came to Hull to play rugby league. And as much as a rugby league player and a great rugby league player he was a great man as well. Absolutely
he was, yeah. A very unassuming man. That's the word that I'm getting from a lot of people. He was very unassuming. He was fairly quiet. He just let his rugby do the talking. But above all else, you know, he was a true family man. You know, to Ros, to Anthony, and to Lisa. Obviously, in time, his grandchildren. And I was speaking with Rosalind just a couple of weeks ago, and Clive's a great granddad now. You know, his legacy through his family lives on. And he lives on through all the rugby league fans throughout the city of Kingston upon Hull as well, you know, regardless of what colour you support.
Yeah, and how much interaction and feedback have you had from the family on this one, Scott?
Well, I contacted Ros, Clive's wife, because I thought it was the right thing to do. I just didn't want to go and put on a play about her husband and Anthony and Lisa's dad without their say so, if you like, you know. So I did contact her, and she came back to me and she said, yeah, absolutely, yeah, we'd love you to do it again. So that was all I needed, really. I've been in contact with Ros just here, there, and everywhere, every now and then, just to keep her updated. And you know, she messaged me the other week about certain things and what have you. But in regards to the story and the play, that's in stone. I know Ros and the family were, when Dave Windass originally wrote the play, I know that they were a huge support to him in regards to information, and obviously filling in gaps of Clive's life that needed to be inserted into the play. And I know that Dave was very, very honoured that he could sit down with the Sullivan family and piece this play together, along with all their input and support. I know that. So they have had a lot of input in regards when the play was written. It has been brought up into the modern day. There's a few little references that have changed in the play to bring it into 2023, but no major changes. It's the play that was really back in 2006, 2007.
Yeah, and you mentioned particularly a younger generation supporter who might not be aware of Clive. You know, they might travel on his road, the road named after him every day, you know, but they might not know the story of Clive Sullivan. What format does the play take? Is it sort of biographical? Is it starting from when he was his early days in Wales and finish with him coming to Hull and playing his rugby league?
Yeah, well, I don't want to give too much away, but the play is actually set on the Clive Sullivan way. That's the set. It's set on the Clive Sullivan way. It's a three-hander, 3 actors. We have a character called Max, who's a taxi driver, and his fare, Shell, who's the fare in the taxi. And then we have Sully himself. I don't want to give the plot away. Some people might already know it anyway, but basically a situation's occurred on the Clive Sullivan way. Max and Shell are on the Clive Sullivan way, and Clive appears. And basically tells through Max and Shell, they tell his story, in the hope that whatever situation they find in themselves in can be resurrected for them as well. So Sully is just Sully, the actor is just Sully, but Max and Shell play all the other people and characters in his life. So they multi-role and multitask all the way through the play. So Max becomes Brian Sullivan as well, Clive's brother. It becomes Anthony. Shell becomes Lisa, and she becomes Ros. So all these characters that are featured in Clive's life are all played by the other 2 actors. So it's a fantastic. It's really cleverly written. It's a fantastic story. It really is.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. And Scott has been a big supporter of the club as well, and obviously having your own recollections and memories of Clive, there must be a bit of responsibility on your shoulders that you're feeling, making sure that it comes across as how you want it to.
Absolutely. I mean, we're starting from scratch again. You know, I started back in 2006, 2007 as well, but we're starting from the beginning, and all the actors have said to me, look, we want to start afresh. We want to put our slant on it, put our curve on it, and make it what we want it to be, you know. So we're really looking forward to getting started on it. We start rehearsals in 2 weeks on Monday. We've got an intense 3-week rehearsal period, and then we're on June the 6th to June the 10th at Hull Trucks. So yeah, looking forward to getting our teeth into it, and let's see if we can get as many people there as we can, both red and white. It'd be fantastic if all the red and whites can come, but any black and whites as well, you know, everybody, you know, if you knew Clive Sullivan and you want to hear his story, you know, get yourself to Hull Truck.
Yeah, definitely. It's running from Tuesday, 6th of June to Saturday, the 10th of June. Tickets are £18.50, concessions £16.50. And it's important, isn't it, that we continue to keep telling these local stories. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, that Clive is so well revered, even though he's not a Hull-born man, but it's almost, he's become an adopted son of the city.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when he was born in 1943 as a Welshman, born in Splot, Cardiff, I guess you probably couldn't envisage how well would he become in another part of the UK. You know, coming to Hull and signing for Hull FC, and then obviously crossing the divide in 1974 and signing for Rovers. I think, well, we know many players have done it, even in recent times, but I don't think anybody has done it with such, reverence as Clive has, and I think that tells the story of the man in general, doesn't it? To score over 100 tries for both clubs, to win a Challenge Cup winners medal with both clubs, and to be loved by both sets of fans and both clubs. I don't think there's many players who've crossed the divide who can actually claim that. But he was a unique man, wasn't he? He was a unique man. He was a unique character, and he was certainly a unique player as well, more than anything. But yeah, I mean, I don't suppose when he was born in Cardiff in 1943, he could have ever envisaged what his life would partake and what it would hold for him. But at the same time, coming to Hull, maybe sort of, did it make him? Did it give him, the career that he deserved? I mean, we know he was a code breaker. We know that he had to come north, as they all did, to earn money to play rugby league. But it was the right place to come for Clive, wasn't it? Clearly, come to Hull. He could have signed for Bradford, actually. It's in the play. He actually played a trial game for Bradford first, and he hardly touched the ball. And basically they said, "Nah, you're not for us, mate." And there was a couple of Hull FC people there, I believe, watching him, and they snapped him up straight away. So he could have signed for Bradford rather than Hull if they'd have taken the bull by the horns, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, perfect example, I suppose, as well. Scott, the fine margins in sport, he has a well-beaten game. He goes and signs for Bradford. It's amazing, isn't it? How life sort of pans out for people. And of course, he wasn't just well regarded in the city of Hull. He made a name for himself on the international stage, a pioneer of the game, first black captain of any national side in the country, and was a real trailblazer in sport in general. And people forget, I think, sometimes just what a star he was on the national stage as well.
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. To be the first black captain of any Great Britain team in any sport is one thing, but then to go on and win the World Cup as the captain and lift that trophy in 1972 in France against the Australians, and of course that try, that full length that he scores, and I don't think anybody could. You can't write that, can you? I guess the sad thing about it, and I think Ros tells this story, and I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning it before, again on the podcast, is that when the team landed back in England from France, there was no reception committee. There was no press waiting for them. They just won the Rugby League World Cup, by the way. There was nobody waiting for them. Clive went home to the family home with the World Cup in his bag, and he went to work the next day. And nobody batted an eyelid. There was no national press. There might have been a little bit of local coverage, but there was no national press there saying, "Wow, Great Britain Rugby League have won the World Cup." Nothing. Clive brought the cup home to the family home and went to work the next day. I mean, it just wouldn't happen in any other sport.
And I suppose that story there, Scott, probably just highlights what humble man he was, and what he wasn't in it for the stardom. Probably he was in it to earn an honest wage, and he'd found a career that he excelled in, and he moved to Hull. And I think one of the things that reasons why he probably enjoyed being in Hull so much is that the South Wales Hull community, coal mining industry, the fishing industry, different, but actually hard-working men who were very humble, very proud of what they did, but they didn't go shouting from the rooftops. And that story there probably just highlights what a man he was.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think there are links there, aren't there? The working class communities of where Clive grew up as a young boy in around Tiger Bay, Cardiff area, Tiger Bay area around Cardiff, around Splot. Very working class community, as you say, probably very similar to the fishing industry, the Hessel Road, two down houses, and lots of people crammed into one living room, and all that sort of stuff when Clive was born. So yeah, I think Cardiff came to Hull, and Hull was part of Cardiff to a certain extent as well. Very, very similar communities, albeit, as you say, the mining and the fishing. But the actual situation that these families found themselves in was very, very similar, wasn't it? Very similar. So I think it's that reference and that relevance is there too, without a doubt.
Yeah, and if you look back, Scott, at your your highlights of Clive Sullivan. What memories do you have of him out on the field?
First time I saw him, 1977 Floodlit Trophy final against St Helens. It was the first ever live game that I went to. I was 4-year-old, and my uncle Pete took me, and he said to me, "Rovers are playing in a cup final. Do you want to go?" Now that didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know anything about rugby league then at 4-year-old. But I always remember my uncle Pete telling me that Rovers played in red. They played in a red band, across the white, a red band across the white chest. But then when Rovers ran out, they were in blue. And that totally threw me. They played in blue that night, blue shirts. But I remember standing at the front of the old East Stand at the old Craven Park on Almas Road. And on the left wing that night, there was this coloured man, this black player. And I couldn't take my eyes off him. And he streaked in for this try, and he was lightning fast. And I couldn't believe that a man could be so fast on 2 legs. He flew in for this try, and I turned to my Uncle Pete, and he just looked at me, my Uncle Pete, and he went, "That's Clive Sullivan." And that's the first time that I ever saw Clive live. And that would have been the 77 Floodlit Trophy final. 4-year-old. I was at Wembley 3 years later, 1980. I was there for the final against the Black and Whites, and obviously Clive played in that game as well. And that fantastic tackle that he made on Graham Bray when he showed Graham Bray the outside, and he went, "Go on then, try me." And even at 37 years old, he smashed Graham Bray into touch, then he pulled him down, slipped that perfect tackle around the legs into touch. And then being an East Hull lad, I was Newbridge Road lad, so we used to walk on Almas Road all the time with my parents, doing a bit of shopping and what have you. And of course, Clive and Sammy Lloyd used to work together in the Bradford and Bingley on Almas Road, and we used to walk past him, and my mum would say, "There's Clive there, give him a wave," and we'd give him a wave, and he would always wave back from his desk in the building society. And he just had time for people as well. He was a very popular man, but he never once, from my recollection, ever forgot to wave. If we walked past him, we waved at him, he waved back, and with that brilliant smile that he always had, that fantastic smile. So they're the memories that I've got. The first time seeing him play, Wembley 1980, and then obviously from there, he ended up back at Hull FC, didn't he, to play in there, replayed Challenge Cup final in '82. So.
Yeah, and I suppose the real shock, of course, was that he did play on quite into later years, didn't he? And then his death, of course, wasn't too long after he'd actually retired from playing. And I think the real shame is he's not been able to enjoy the adulation that people would give him, if he'd had a much longer life. And it was a shock at the time, I suppose, for someone who was not stopped playing too long ago to then pass away like he did. I'm not old enough to remember him playing. I was born the year he died. But talking to family and stuff like that who did support Rovers at the time and did go to the games, they said it was one thing is that it united the city in black and white, red and white, in paying homage to someone who'd given so much to people and so much to the city in terms of his sporting excellence and he's just all around being a good guy.
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, there's not many people who unite a city, especially in sporting regard. But Clive certainly did that, didn't he? He certainly did. Just the fact that of what he achieved with both clubs is something quite remarkable. I don't know if it'll ever be done again. Just even the amount of games he played. He played 200 plus for Rovers. I think he played 300 plus for Hull FC. 500 and odd games and scoring over 100 tries for both clubs. It's unheard of, isn't it? It just wouldn't happen in the modern game. So he certainly united a city. And he's just loved, isn't he? He's just loved and on both sides of the river. As I say, regardless of what team you support, what colours you wear, everybody loves him, don't they? And I think that's the adulation for a man who passed away back in 1985 that is still loved so much as he is today. Yeah,
definitely, Scott. I know I'm definitely looking forward to it. I can't wait to come and see the show. We fast forward to now, Hull Kingston Rovers enjoying a little bit of a renaissance. Fantastic start to the season. Of course, we're in the international break now. But what have you made of the Robins so far in 2023?
I'm loving it. It's like an all new era, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like what I'm seeing at the moment. I think most importantly for me as well is that we've got this never say die attitude, haven't we? Whereas, Castleford was an example last Friday night. First half weren't great. Castleford were really up for it. They wanted to go, didn't they? But, the old Rovers of maybe 3 or 4 years ago might have gone in 20 points down in that first half. Yeah, we hung in there. We knew we were up against it a little bit, but yet we only went in 6-0 down. And then it was very similar to the Salford game at the start of the season, wasn't it? That was very similar. We were sort of outplayed first half, but knowing if you go into the sheds at half time reasonably still in the game, you've always got a chance. And that's what happened with Rovers. And I think that's the difference with Rovers this year. There's certainly a team who don't know when to beat. You can see the unity in the players as well, without a shadow of a doubt. That team ethic and that team unity is there for all to see. Even when they all gathered round at Castleford Friday night after the final hooter, they all got in a huddle, didn't they? And you can see Jordan Abdul firing orders out even after the game's finished, and you can see there's a real unity in the team, and it's something we've not had for a long time. And I'm not saying we're going to win trophies. I don't know if we'll get to a Challenge Cup final or whether we'll even make the top 6. I'd like to think we would in the position that we're in at the moment. But, what we're seeing now is a team that are certainly proud to wear the shirt. They're proud to pull on that Hull Kingston Rovers badge and give everything for the cause. And as fans, we can't ask any more than that, can we?
No, and it's quite apt we're talking about Sully and the show and stuff, because there's whole generations of supporters who've not experienced the glory years of the late 70s and the 80s, and you can understand why supporters do get a bit giddy sometimes after a string of good results, because we're so desperate to either taste success for the first time, or probably like people like yourself, Scott, who want them glory days to come back again.
Yeah, I mean, I was there through the 80s when we won the back-to-back titles and things like that. But again, I was only, 11, 12, 13 years old. I wasn't really old enough to appreciate it, really. I was lucky that I was there to see it. And that was a great team. That team, that won the back-to-back titles, and obviously the Premiership in 84. And, the first team to do the double, that was some team, that really was. But as I say, I was only 11, 12-year-old, so I didn't really appreciate what I was seeing at that time, really. So I'd love to see it again. And my lad as well, I'd take my lad.
I suppose at the time, Scott, you think it's never going to end, never going to stop, do you? You just think once to start winning, it's going to last forever. And we've seen, unfortunately, with the Robins, nothing does last forever. But we are desperate to see success again, and they seem to have got the right man in charge, 𝗕𝗖𝗄𝗎𝗍𝒄. We're talking about one humble gentleman, Sully, Clive Sullivan, and 𝗕𝗖𝗄𝒎𝒄𝗎 seems to be a very grounded individual. Don't get too excited. Very workman-like. Very. He don't go shouting from the rooftops. He knows what the job is and how to get it done. And he's got the players sort of performing very much how he preaches. And I think the defensive side, what you mentioned, Scott, is the big improvement on the Robins this year.
Yeah. I think Brett Delaney's got a lot of praise for that, hasn't he? I think Brett's been fantastic in that department, hasn't he? I think he works on that side of things at the club, doesn't he? Probably along with Dave Hodgson, and I'm sure Danny Maguire is more involved in the attack side of things. But our defensive structures now and our numbers on the edges and what have you. I mean, how many times our right edge for years was just broken every game, wasn't it? You're thinking, as soon as I'd see move the ball to their left and down to our right edge, you just thought, you just thought a try was coming every time, didn't you? But now we seem a little bit, it's tighter, isn't it? We don't give a lot away. We don't concede many points, do we? And if especially with the lads I stand within the East Stand, we always say if you can concede around 10 to 12 points a game, you can accept that. You can probably win the majority of games by conceding 10, 12 points. But if you're having to score 30 points to win a match every week, you ain't going to win many, are you? So
and we've seen that on all too many occasions, haven't we, where we've been left to chase a game and it's just not panned out for us. And like you said against Castleford, as good as Castleford was in that first half, aggressive, intense, they only came away with six points, didn't they, at half time? And you thought if Rovers could get the next score, it was game on for the Robins, and thankfully that's how it panned out.
I think when we saw Castleford take the drop goal with 20 minutes to go, I think that summed it up. I think they knew that, hang on, we're in bother here because Hull KR got stuck with us. They've stayed in the game, and we know that they can see games out. It might be ugly, but we know Hull KR can see games out. And I think that's why they took the point so early. But I don't think there was always a chance that Rovers were going to score another try or another couple, wasn't there? There's always that chance. We probably should have won by a bigger margin, to be fair. Corey Hall dropping the ball over the line, and there was a couple of disallowed ones, weren't they? So 12-7, it was a close game, but I think second half we were in control, weren't we? And we could have won by a bigger margin, to be fair. Yeah,
well, let's hope they really kick on after the international break. Huddersfield up next at home. Huddersfield, Scott, they're not a side that seems to be hitting the straps just yet. Of course, I mean they've just gone and lost to our nearest and dearest rivals. A game that really shouldn't hold any fear for the Robins.
No, I don't see why any game should. It's certainly on our own pitch, certainly down at Craven Park. I think teams probably fear coming to Craven Park now because it's a tough place to come for any team. We've seen that with Wigan already. We've seen it with St Helens, albeit, I know people would say St Helens were probably weakened in the pack, but you can only beat what's in front of you at the end of the day, can't you? And we had a couple missing ourselves, but I don't think Craven Park's I don't think it's the most favourite place for teams to come. Although I am quite surprised with Huddersfield, their start to the season. When you look down their squad list, you think, wow, they've got some players there at that club. But they just don't seem to have hit the straps yet, do they? They just seem to be... But they're nearly there, aren't they? They're not getting hammered, but the games they're losing by a few points. But I thought with the players and their squad list that they've got, they'd be probably a bit higher in the table than they are. I think they've lost 5 of 9, haven't they? Something like that. So... Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I don't think we need to fear anybody, down at Craven Park. I really don't. We've got to do what we do well, what we do best, and let the other teams worry about us. And what with Abdul's kicking, and you don't know what you're going to get with them kicks, do you? So every team, I think. Although to be fair to Greg Eden, he took everyone on Friday night, didn't he? So
it's sod's law, isn't it? Absolute sod's law. Of all the players you'd want probably under them bombs, he's the one. And then he goes and catches them all.
Every single one. And when he played for us, he dropped everyone, didn't he?
Yeah, you're right there, Scott. Well, Scott, it's been absolutely fantastic. Sully is at Hull Theatre from the Tuesday 6th of June to Saturday 10th of June. Tickets are £18.50 adult, £16.50 concessions. Scott is, of course, the director of the show. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it, Scott. And finally, you must be really excited just to get this out there for people to come and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the most important thing for people to come and watch. People, as I said at the beginning, people will know Clive's story, but there's some people who don't. And it's important that we do tell his story. So please come. I know times are hard for people at the moment and people don't have a lot of spare cash floating around, but if you can come and just buy a ticket or two to come and support this show and come and hear Clive's story, then, I do thank you in advance, as I'm sure the cast do as well, and the tech team that are working with us. And please just come and enjoy Clive's story, and, perhaps you might learn anything or two, who knows?
Yeah, wonderful, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on and discussing the show. It's been a real privilege to be able to speak to you and, of course, speak about our love for Hull Kingston Rovers. This has been the Red Robin podcast, which is powered by 360 Chartered Accountants and Budget Tyres Auto Centre. But for now, just remember, live, love, laugh and be happy.